Ready?
Yes.
I'd like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of June 15th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please, Donna.
O'Brien.
Present.
Balmas.
Present.
Hood. Thorstensen.
Here.
Ross. Garner.
Here.
All ayes, all absent. Present, rather. Sorry.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before I start, I would like to personally, on behalf of everybody in this community, thank Chief Smith, absolutely, for the stellar job protecting this community, and Mr. Rigwood, Public Works support. It's the scariest thing, I'm sure, as a whole community we face at the same time, and you guys just did a spectacular job. Please join me in some applause. Please share our thanks with your departments for stepping up and really going above and beyond to make sure this community was safe. We appreciate it. Okay, then we are going to move on to approval of the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Donna.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood. Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Yeah.
All ayes.
That's what happens when you don't have a meeting for 2 weeks. All ayes, right?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the May 18, 2020 Village Board meeting. Item number 2, approval and public release of minutes from executive closed session meetings on August 5, 2019, October 21, 2019, January 27, 2020, and April 6, 2020. Item number 3, approval of firefighter paramedic Keith Hazelwood's request to participate in the village's tuition assistance program in pursuit of a bachelor's degree in fire science from Columbia Southern University. Item number 4, approval of resolution 2020-07 establishing certain property of the village of Gurnee to be surplus. Item number 5, approval of resolution 2020-08 approving a contract with AEP Energy for the provision of electricity for streetlights. Item number 6, approval of payroll for period ending May 22nd, 2020 in the amount of $801,230.33. Item number 7, approval of payroll for period ending June 5th, 2020 in the amount of $945,070.26. Item number 8, approval of bills for period ending June 1st, 2020 in the amount of $453,550.02. Item number 9, approval of bills for period ending June 15, 2020 in the amount of $2,116,570.86.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the
So moved.
consent agenda? Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Quinn, trustee O'Brien. Me too. Roll call, please, Donna.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
All ayes.
Motion carries. Petitions and communications. Anything, Patrick?
Not tonight.
All right, we're going to move on to reports. And tonight we have an update from our finance director, Brian Gosnell, for our fourth quarter financial performance and our COVID-19 financial impact. Brian, it's all yours.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I just want to spend a few slides here going over fourth quarter fiscal year 2020, and then we'll get into what we've seen so far in fiscal year 21 with the impact from the COVID-19 crisis. Looking at cash and investments, as of April 30th, total just over $31,410,000. 73% of that's in the general fund, 15% in the water and sewer fund. We keep 27% of that money in checking money market accounts, primarily at First Midwest and Gurnee Bank. Again, 40% in money markets at Illinois Funds and Gurnee Bank, and then 33% in short-term fixed incomes. That's our Schwab investment account. Yield versus the benchmark here, our 91-day T-bill benchmark, the village portfolio is earning 1.187 versus 0.138. Obviously, the declining interest rate environment that has come upon us recently had a huge impact here with the timing. Typically, if you remember last year when interest rates were going up, we were actually earning a little bit more in the money market than we were in our short-term fixed income accounts. In a declining interest rate environment, that flip-flops, which is why you have those investments to keep it steady on both the uptick and the downside. So, looking at major general fund revenues, overall, they finished the year slightly ahead of budget and slightly ahead of last year. Sales tax just behind budget in last year. Home rule sales tax the same, a little bit greater there. The difference is how autos and groceries are taxed. Local use tax finished ahead of budget as expected. That's due to the internet sales tax that has been on there for a little while now. Amusement tax finished ahead of budget, just slightly behind last year. But if you remember, we had an additional payment of $500,000 last year, so definitely ahead of where we should be, or good progress there. Hotel tax finished behind budget and just ahead of last year. Without the impact from April, we would have been right at budget, which was about $200,000 there, and we had a budget variance of a negative $208,000 roughly. So without that, we would have finished right on target. Food and beverage, same story here. Finished slightly ahead of budget, a little bit behind last year, but again, we had an impact of April of a negative $45,000. That was, and when I say April, that's for sales in March. So what activity from March that we received in April. Then building permits, same thing here, finished pretty far behind last year and budget. Obviously, impacts from March and April on that. April had a negative $88,000 impact, and then March had some as well. So building permits activity saw a drop in April of 59% from the prior year. The good news is in May it was only 34% from the prior year. So trending in the right direction anyway. Overall, general fund revenues finished the year at 97.38%. On its face, that might look bad, but we had a budget of $1.8 million use of fund balance to pay off the bonds early, so we actually ended at just under 1.2 under. So we were actually finished the year $650,000 better than we thought we would, if that makes sense. A couple just variances here I want to point out. Intergovernmental category, just timing of the SAFER grant receipts got less than we anticipated, and then impacts from March and April in the fines and forfeitures category on obviously traffic and red light cameras and things like that. Those last 2 months kind of dropped off. Other sources there at the bottom, you can see that finished at 8.4%. That's where we budgeted the 1.8. We don't actually make an entry for that. We just budget it so we have the authority to be able to use it. So overall, like I said, revenues came in about $650 better than expected when you take into account the budget for paying off the bonds early. On the expenditure side, finished under budget by about 1.13. So if we look at where we thought we would be versus where we ended up, we only had about a $35,000 swing, and we were able to pay off the bonds early. So if you look at it, in essence, we used $35,000 of fund balance and paid off the Series 2011 bonds, which is pretty good. So a good story there. Salaries over budget here due to overtime in police and fire, and then professional and technical services. We had a finance position that we kept contracted instead of hired full-time. So we had a little bit of savings in salaries offset by that increased contract. Water and sewer side, consumption for the year was down 5%. We see that in the charges for services revenue. Total revenues here finished at 98.56% of budget, about $135,000 behind. On the expenditure side, finished at 88.24% of budget. So when we combine surplus here with the capital side, we budgeted a $500,000 drawdown in that fund, which we've talked about during our multi-year capital plan for the last few years. And we ended the year with a $418,000 surplus. So positive finish to the year there. Looking at police and fire pensions, had kind of a rough up and down last 6 months here or so. Looking at the police side, average monthly balance, portfolio balance of 56 point, almost 2 million. Had gains for the year of 2.5 million. That gives us 4.5% on the year, 4.55% on the year, and 8.72 on the 36-month rolling average. Again, versus our 7% assumed actuarial return. Fire side, average portfolio balance just over 41.3 million, 804,000 in gains in income. Leaves us with just under 2% for the year and 5.31 for the 36-month rolling average. Any questions on Q4 before I get into the, I guess, May results from and the impact of the COVID-19 crisis? So moving into that, we're officially in Phase 3, hopefully moving to Phase 4. Looking at the big three, the status of where we're at. Six Flags presented their reopening plan, hoping to be open in Phase 4. Gurnee Mills reopened in Phase 3 with some limitations. Food court's not open, different entrances are only open. You gotta, have PPE on and stuff like that. Great Wolf Lodge, recently, along with 7 other hotels, extended a contract with the Navy to house recruits through August. That's great for those businesses. It doesn't generate any tax for the village, however. So calculate that out based on room nights and average price like that's about $500,000 to the village's hotel tax. Just a reminder that with the Great Wolf, we do have a rebate agreement with them. We hit our base 4 months prior to the end of last fiscal year, so it gives you a little idea of what kind of cushion we have there. I wouldn't anticipate us hitting our base the way this year's going, but we got a little bit of breathing room before we get to that point. IML came out with some figures late last week that predict a reduction in income tax and motor fuel tax, about $350,000 from where we budgeted in income tax and about $150,000 in motor fuel tax. If you remember, our first budget amendment, we utilized motor fuel tax for the road program to keep that going this year rather than general capital funds. But we did have some rebuild Illinois funds that we didn't anticipate in the budget. So we're still ahead of the game in MFT even with this $150,000 reduction. And the water fund usage through May and into June has been pretty consistently down anywhere between 20 and 25%. So we can expect that to follow through June and as long as the shutdown continues and the corresponding revenues with lower water consumption. So that's kind of the environment we're in right now, or status of it. What we've done so far, as I mentioned, we had the first budget amendment that eliminated the capital transfer from the general fund to the capital fund, reduced our economic development reserve, $250,000, I believe that was, went from $300 to $50,000. We utilized the IEPA loan in the water fund rather than paying the remaining of that through fund balance, and utilized the MFT money, about $1 million, instead of using capital fund money. So we have that. Keep the road program going in anticipation of a huge drop in home rule sales tax in the capital fund. Outside that budget amendment, we've delayed pretty much all the capital projects and capital spending between vehicles and other capital items, buildings and building maintenance. We reduced some contractual professional services. We talked about updating the strategic plan. Obviously, that's on hold, that kind of stuff. And we had some personnel items that we had. Obviously, the COLA we've talked about and brought that forward. Some other stuff that may come up later in the year. Not filling open positions, not moving forward with promotions, and then some meetings and conventions, kind of putting some of that stuff on hold when it's not critical to the mission. So we put together some really scenarios here to show how financially how the crisis has impacted us. The first scenario, I think I can highlight it here, is just fiscal year-to-date actual versus fiscal year-to-date budget. So take the budget, slice it into 12 pieces. If we're 50% of the way through the year, we take 50% of the budget and compare actual to that. Doesn't take into account seasonality, doesn't take into account anything that happened versus last year. It's really the simplest way to look at where you are versus budget. It's also the basis for looking at potential reinstatement of the cost of living increases that were negotiated with the bargaining units. So we keep an eye on that, and the number we want to watch here is the Big Four total. So the Big Four total here is 36.1% down versus budget, versus fiscal year-to-date budget. Overall, general funds is down 25.9%, and you can see the Big Four total there, even though there's 5 of them, we split out sales tax and home rule sales tax, but an amusement tax, hotel tax, food and beverage tax, again, you can see the variances there, all down significantly from straight line fiscal year-to-date budget. We also have a category that we look at called Other COVID-19 Impacted Revenues. Here's where we see income tax, building permits, some charges for service, some fines and forfeitures, charges for service being ambulance, on the ambulance side, and off-duty police. That is down 19.3%, again, versus straight line fiscal year-to-date budget. So simplest way to look at it, doesn't take into account seasonality and last year, which are important factors to consider. Second scenario is seasonally adjusted budget. So what we look at here is take this year's budget, assume everything came in the way it did last year, and that is how we account for seasonality. So it takes into account, back to school shopping, holiday shopping, things like that, and fluctuates that budget accordingly. As you can see here, most important piece, 19% down general fund revenues overall, 20.3 for the Big Four, and here you see the sales tax and home rule sales tax actually has a positive variance. That's because we haven't gotten, May receipts were actually for February, so we don't see that impact yet. We did see it with the June receipts, which were for March when we had about 10 days of shutdown, and those were down a combined about 20.15%, somewhere in there, or 21.5%, sorry, about $300,000 was the impact for the 10-day closure. So we'll see how July comes in, will be a full month of closure, so we'll see how that goes. As you can see, amusement tax, hotel tax, food and beverage, all those obviously down significantly because of the shutdown in May. Look at those other impacted revenues, they're down about 50%. Again, a full month of shutdown here. And then finally, we look at where we were versus last year. Again, this is obviously a significant number, taking non-shutdown versus shutdown. Looking at the Big Four, again, down almost 20%, overall down almost 20%. You see the sales tax and home rule sales tax not impacted again yet because we don't feel that impact until the June receipts. And again, significantly down for amusement, hotel, food and beverage. And then about 47% on the other COVID-19 impacted revenues. So far we've utilized about 1.3 million in fund balance. So fund balance varies throughout the year. Some months will contribute to it, some months will use it depending on when large expenditures come in. So for example, in May, we pay our annual property liability work comp insurance premium. It's about $2 million, so that is one huge payment that comes out in May, so that'll obviously be one of those months where we use fund balance. Typically over the summer months, we'll build that back up, and then later in the year when we pay debt service, we don't have that this year, but when we pay debt service and the pension payments, which used to be about $7 million, it'll be about $5 million this year, obviously we'll use that fund balance will draw down again. So it's not a straight line. It will fluctuate month to month, but we'll keep track of that number and obviously report that versus the prior year as we get going. Questions on any of those scenarios or the numbers? It's tough without seeing 20% down versus the seasonally adjusted budget in last year. Sounds bad, but you got to remember 30% of the month we were close here, so some of that, and especially when you see the 21.5% in sales tax that we got in June, 21% down, but we were closed for 30% of the month, so it's in that aspect is a little better. Obviously, with amusement, hotel, food, and beverage, those are just a month delay, so we're looking at full month shutdowns there. And that is all I had as far as those impacts. Again, it's only 1 month, so without the sales tax impact, which is the big numbers, It's kind of hard to show or to know what the overall impact will be, but we will definitely see that. We saw the 21.5%, 300,000 down in June, just sales tax. July will be worse.
Such an optimist. Questions? Obviously, we have to watch this closely. And I know Brian and Pat watch it daily, but we have to watch this closely so we can start planning how we're going to respond. Late this summer is probably with the next time we really need to start making some decisions, so. Questions?
So
It is what it is,
It is what it is, a big loss.
yeah.
But we're on, I'm confident that I am confident that we're on this thing, so we'll come out of it in due time. Is there an idea of what the total loss of revenue is so far?
So
Is there such a figure?
there's a couple outliers, but I'd say the majority of the, at least finance director communities is centering around that 25% number. Again, there's a couple, on each side of that spectrum, but
And we could weather 25% with the plans we kind of have in place with Tier 1 and Tier 2. So that's best possible scenario. It's not good, but we can weather that. We can get through, just like we did in 2008 through 2013, when we had the same type of crisis, not as widespread, but similar. And out of that is why we did all this financial contingency planning, so.
The next 2 months are gonna be tough. So when sales tax comes in for April and May, which everything was closed, I mean, the key will be when we get to June, July, August, what that trend looks like. Is it staying flat? Is it going up? So, I mean, that'll be the telltale. And then obviously, like Brian alluded to, with the Navy using the hotels until August, again, that's money that's not gonna show up this year. Six Flags is working on their reopening plan with the state, so we'll see what kind of progress they make. But the next couple months, it's gonna be interesting. And like I said, once we get to the June and July payments, which will be later on this fall, see what that looks like. We'll have a better feel for what additional actions we will need to take, so.
And keep in mind, the state has given relief to retailers in remitting their sales tax, so there could be even more of a delay. From April, do we have any idea how many people, oh no, we don't have April, we only had March.
we don't have any idea. There was a time when it looked like the Department of Revenue was going to give us some information on that, but the numbers came back and it said like 20,000 was only delayed, and they couldn't really explain what the number was or how they came about it. So what we thought would be helpful information really didn't turn out to be very helpful. But again, they're getting inundated with so many requests for information right now and trying to do their best job getting information out. It's just, there's a lot of variables there with 60-day delay for certain businesses and other businesses having to pay on time. So, I don't want to disparage the job they're doing. It's just, there's a lot of requests coming in for information.
And there's been some opportunity for reimbursement of costs related to COVID, but we haven't had a ton of costs. It's on the revenue side where we're hurting. The expense side, I mean, I think we submitted 55,000.
We submitted 55,000 originally with some personnel costs in there. The latest direction from the county is they're going to take the hard costs, so costs for PPE, disinfected buildings and things like that. And it sounds like that's going to be fairly fast-tracked, which for us I think is about 18,000, I want to say, somewhere in there. But there's going to take a little time and come out with some guidance on the personnel side. So, it has to be, the original guidance was it has to be non-budgeted, it has to be substantially for with a lot of, very ill-defined parameters for what could be reimbursed from a personnel standpoint. But we'll get some more guidance on that. We have the numbers ready to go. Whenever we need to submit them, we'll be ready to submit and see if
Yeah,
we
we've tracked
get
everything and
reimbursed.
coded it from the beginning as far as expenses related to the COVID response. So, I mean, Brian can pull that really easy, and when those opportunities come up, we submit for reimbursement if we can. But like I said, and it'll be nice to get that money back, but it's not an expense issue. It's all on the revenue side.
And we did submit for our expenses related to the unrest, all of that got submitted too. So we were under a disaster declaration, so we may be able to recoup the overtime and the equipment that was used to respond to the
Yeah, they're
civil
collecting
unrest.
those numbers right now.
Yeah, that'll actually be submitted tomorrow. I think it's
Yep.
due Wednesday, so.
So we're applying for everything that we can, which usually we're like, oh, it's not worth the time, money, and effort to do all this, because but now we need every penny that we can recoup.
So going forward, we'll have those reports the second meeting of each month, because we'll have the sales tax, get the sales
Yep.
tax in the first week to 10 days, so we'll have that, so we'll have this report on the second meeting of each month. And then tomorrow morning, you've got a memo here also to all employees, so this will go out to all the employees. It's a lot of the same information that we provided to you, just simplified a little bit, so the employees are aware of where we're at revenue and expense-wise as well. So we'll get that out, and again, that'll be shared with the employees on a monthly basis. We'll present to the board, next morning it'll go out to the employees, so.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Mayor?
Oh,
I just have-
Trustee O'Brien?
I just actually have a question, not necessarily related to this. Do we have any kind of idea on the grant, the shovel-ready grant?
No, we were trying to get information today. So that's,
The only thing we heard is that they were getting so many in that they stopped accepting them before the deadline. So the deadline was today, and I think they stopped accepting them right around the 1st. So,
Thank you.
okay. It's reports, we have no old business.
correct.
All right, we're going to move on to new business. The first is item approval of ordinance 2020-40,
40?
granting special use permits related to signage pursuant to the Gurnee zoning ordinance for 6155-6161 Route 132.
Sure, so you had a memo from our associate planner, Clara Gable, on this. This relates to the Northwestern Medical Building that is under construction in front of the Holiday Inn. Early last year, before the PZB regarding a parking modification to allow the construction of this medical office building, that was granted. At that time, staff let them know that when that parking field was subdivided off from the rest of the Holiday Inn site, the Holiday Inn sign would be an off-premise sign, which is not allowed by code and requires a special use permit. In addition, we let them know that the ground sign needed for their facility would also need a special use permit because you're only allowed one per property frontage. So those are both known by the developer. They move forward. As it relates to this, the Holiday Inn sign will not change. They will leave that as is at that location, so you'll see no change in that. The Northwestern Medical sign, which there is a rendering in your packet, will be immediately east of their Grand Avenue entrance there. It'll be a routed metal cabinet sign with internal illuminated lettering, 59 square feet, 8 feet 10 inches tall, meets all of our code requirements, except for the required setback to Grand Avenue, which was something that the Planning and Zoning Board has already approved for them, doesn't need village board approval. So those are the two special use permit requests before you. One for the Holiday Inn sign is an off-premise sign, and two for the Northwestern medical sign, allowing two signs on that frontage. And as I said, there are some renderings in your packet of that new sign.
Questions from the trustees?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Thorstensen. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood. Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
All ayes.
All right, motion carries. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2020-41, granting a special use permit pursuant to the Gurnee zoning ordinance for a martial arts studio at 905 Lakeside Drive.
Sure. Again, another memo from our associate planner, Clara Gable, on this. Clinton Blackburn is requesting a special use permit to allow the establishment and operation of a mixed martial arts studio at 905 Lakeside Drive. Suite 3 will occupy about 6,000 square feet of the existing 64,000 square foot building. Operate 6 days a week from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, 11 to 1 on Saturday. looking at a maximum number of students in any one class of 15. Mr. Blackburn, who's the owner, is the only employee. No special events or competitions. The hours of the operation are after when other tenants in the building use it, so shouldn't be any parking issues. There is another recreational type entity already in this building, UXL CrossFit, so this would be the second one in there. Was before the Planning and Zoning Board May 6th, got a unanimous favorable recommendation, and is before you tonight for consideration.
Are you Mr. Blackburn? Welcome. Any questions from the trustees?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by trustee Thorstensen, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please, Donna.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Hood. Thorstensen,
Yes.
Ross,
Aye.
Garner,
Aye.
all ayes.
All right, motion carries. Welcome to the village and the best of luck.
You can't see, but we're smiling underneath.
Yeah, we're
you.
smiling. All right, item number 3, approval of ordinance 2020-42, approving addendum number 1 to the Cemetery Road Water Tank Maintenance Contract between Utility Service Company and the Village of Gurnee. Patrick, I
Sure,
give you
so
the
this one, you had
pleasure.
a memo from me that I put together in conjunction with Public Works and Utility Division. So you'll remember our Cemetery Road Reservoir is 3 million gallons concrete tank constructed in 1992. It's our largest water storage facility. Since it was constructed, we've never completely drained the tank. So anytime we did maintenance or any inspections, they were divers in wetsuits going in there, underwater, checking out the condition of the tank. So all of our water towers are on a maintenance contract with Utility Service Corporation. Have had really good luck with them, been happy with the service. Got to a point with the Cemetery Road Reservoir that we looked at putting that on a maintenance program. Bill Murphy was here before the village board early last year, presented the results of a detailed inspection report that they did, pointed out issues with the reservoir that needed to be addressed. And then subsequently, April 1st of last year, the village board approved that contract. They got started with the work in September, wrapped it up at the end of November, and then over the next month, worked on some interior components that were being installed. Then we came into the holidays, things got put on hold, we had some conflict schedules, and in about the middle of January, finally got to a point where we could refill and chlorinate the tank. So we did that, and then we let it sit for a couple weeks to make sure that there were no issues with it. During that couple week period, we noticed that it was losing water, so we drained it on January 27th. Once it was empty, Public Works thought maybe the issue was the pipe going in and out of the tank, so they pressure checked that. But also, when the tank was empty and we got in there, we noticed that there were new cracks in the floor that had appeared, and also some coating that had chipped off around these cracks. So we brought in Utility Service to take a look at it. They did, had some discussions back and forth, and then we both mutually decided that it'd be best to bring in an independent third-party engineering firm to take a look at it and render their opinion. Baxter & Woodman was involved with the tank when it was originally constructed, so we worked with them, brought them in, split the cost with Utility Service to have them come in and take a look and render their opinion. What Baxter & Woodman came up with based on what they seen between the cracks in the floor and then some of the posts that support the roof in the tank were actually bent, is that when the tank was empty, the water pressure from below pushed up on the floor and shifted the floor, heaved the floor, and bent those posts and also created those new cracks. We, as part of that report, Baxter & Woodman, we asked them to provide what they think would be a solution and an estimated cost. They recommended applying basically a elastic urethane coating on the floor of the tank and then 4 feet up the walls to seal it back up and get it back in service. They estimated that at about $500,000. We asked Suez to take a look at that and provide us a quote. They quoted us $370,000 and said that this was a discounted price, that basically that was the price for them to do it and not make any profit off it based off their long-standing relationship with us. $370,000 is a lot of money, so we asked them to go back and come up with another option as far as remedying the cracks and the leaking of the tank. The second quote they came back with in proposal was to only address the cracks in the floor, or major cracks that they believe are leaking, and recoat it with the same coating that's currently in the tank. So not this different elastic coating going 4 feet up the walls. What they would do, the cracks in the floor, they would drill holes every 6 inches, fill it with epoxy, then go back, smoothen out, and reseal those major cracks. So they came back a price for that of $99,250. At that point, Public Works, myself, David Ziegler, got on the phone with Suez and had a pretty blunt conversation about where we were at and our thoughts and feelings about the tank being out of service for so long and then ending up at this spot. Suez went back, and they had stated that the $99,250 was already a discounted price. They went back and knocked another $12,000 off the price to $87,000 with an option to pay it over 2 years. So, as I put in my notes, it's an unfortunate situation. You know, the tank had never been drained in the 30 years that we had it. And with the bent posts in there, I mean, there is evidence that the floor was lifted in some way, shape, or form, and bent those support posts. So we need to get this thing back into service. We're somewhat lucky that COVID-19 came and that Six Flags and Great Wolf and all of them aren't using a lot of water. So we've been able to get by, but again, it's a 3 million gallon reservoir. That is a very important piece of our water infrastructure. So worked with Attorney Winter, drafted up an ordinance, drafted up an addendum. Suez is agreeable to it. They've signed it. So we're recommending to move forward with the $87,000. As I had in my notes also, we didn't budget the additional $43,500, which would be the first half of the payment, but we'll find that in the utility fund to get that taken care of. So Tom is here. If there's questions from his standpoint, I'm here. But it kind of is what it is. It needs to get fixed, and we looked at a couple different options, and they believe this will get it taken care of and get it back into service.
This is way less expensive than losing that reservoir completely and having to build another water tower. So 30 years, that's not bad. Unfortunate, the timing, but still a wise investment to make sure we get it repaired correctly. Questions from the trustees?
Make a motion to approve.
Mike, I have a question.
Trustee Garner?
Is this going to be an ongoing problem after the repair? I mean, is this going to wind up being a thorn in our side, or is it the type of repair that they've done before at other places and it's lasted?
Yeah, I mean, we asked them for a proposal that would remedy this solution, and this is what they came back with. They're the concrete tank experts, not us. And like I said before, I mean, there is evidence that the floor was lifted with those steel support posts bent. If it was just a bunch of cracks on the floor that appeared, it'd be a different story. But I mean, the floor was moved up and bent those posts. So with water back in the tank, you'll have that pressure pushing down against it, so it shouldn't lift again from the pressure underneath.
So are we going to have to replace the posts at some point? Because
No, the posts, I think, do they need to be replaced? No? Okay. I mean, there was a minor of enough bend in them that it cracked the coating off the post.
Okay.
So, and it was only a couple, if I remember correctly, so, and there's, how many posts in there? 66 posts in there, so I mean, it was a couple of them that got bent, so.
So I guess my question is, are we confident that with this repair, that we'll be good for a while?
I asked them for a quote that would repair this thing where we wouldn't be back here again.
And
that's
if
what they
not,
came
what
with.
would the recourse be? Maybe that's a question for Brian.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the design of the tank, it had some mechanisms, that you could relieve the pressure, but there were no pumps in that. And so, it wasn't, it was just an unfortunate situation that at that particular time of year, that the ground moisture caused that condition. So, the thought going forward is that the tank is going to be filled with water, and we won't be back at that same position. It is kind of tricky to have a cement reservoir without water, because then all of a sudden now you have to take into account the groundwater. So that's a very isolated situation, and as Pat explained, that tank had never been emptied to that point ever before.
Sure.
And so I think the village is certainly in a good position. They now fully understand that if that tank is ever taken down to be empty, you may have to bring off-site pumps in to ameliorate ground pressure. So it was really a unique situation that occurred, and hopefully this repair, it is a maintenance repair that had never been done before. Once it's completed, it has a useful life, but it should have a very long useful life.
And how long does it take to do the repair? How long would that?
We put a provision in here that I believe they had, we gave them like 6 weeks, I think it was 6 weeks, 4 weeks or 6 weeks to get working on this, so it was something that we want them on it right away, because it's been out of service long enough. It's been out of service since September of last year. I was trying to find it here. What's that? August 1, okay, so, yeah.
All right, trustee O'Brien?
I'm ready to second. I just have one quick comment, though, that this can't be the first concrete water tower that they've drained. So you'd think that they would have known that that was a possibility, that this could have happened. So I'm glad that they made the effort, but culpability is a little bit on their shoulders for not recognizing the fact that this could have happened.
We would have appreciated them sharing that information with us if they thought it was a possibility, because then we wouldn't have left the tank
Exactly.
for that long. Completely agree.
Trustee Ross?
Seconded. but
Oh,
not
Jeannie has the second.
But she got
No, I made the
I
motion.
mean, you made the motion, Jeannie made the motion.
seconded.
Okay, so, any other questions? I have a motion by trustee Bomas, a second by trustee Ross.
Oh, okay.
Roll call.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Hood,
Yes.
Thorstensen,
Yes.
Ross, Garner,
Aye.
all ayes.
All right, motion carries. Let's get this behind us.
Before we adjourn the committee of the whole next week, the committee of the whole meeting next week. I don't
Oh.
have anything.
Yeah, we don't really have anything, I mean, we have lots of stuff going on, but the big thing is the financials right now. We don't want to be initiating any other projects. There was a couple things that Pat asked for feedback on in the administrator memos, comprehensive land plan, whether we should wait on that. I think there was something else, but nothing for committee of the whole. So if anyone has if you have no objections, we'd like to cancel committee of the whole next week.
Make a motion.
Motion by trustee
Second.
Bomas, second by trustee O'Brien. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, no committee of the whole meeting next week. All right, and there's no public here.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by trustee Bomas, second by trustee Thorstensen. To adjourn, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right,